I remember as a child my mother giving me her favorite childhood book, The Good Master, written and beautifully illustrated in 1935 by Kate Sarity. Pages well worn, but intact enough to read. I was about 10 years old, and it was my first summer at sleepaway camp, and I was terrified. My cabin mates could choose a story that our counselor would read before bedtime, which was a total treat, and they chose my mother's favorite book. Having the luxurious experience of being read to was and is one of my favorite memories and truly solidified my love of stories and books. Of course, Kate Sarity became my author of choice at that age, and I quickly read her other books. Storytelling through written word is truly a gift, and when you can enjoy it read aloud is perhaps an even bigger gift because you can relax into it in a different way. I think in some ways, podcasts can have that same sort of pull for me. Listening to stories as well as reading them ourselves invites us into worlds that we may not otherwise visit, and it empowers us to perhaps be more open to things we may not understand, and certainly gives us choices and opportunities that without the fundamental skills that reading offers, we may never have. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. And for all of you followers, Small and Gutsy has just been granted nonprofit 501c3 status. We are thrilled to have moved in this direction, enabling us to continue to meet our vision of interviewing as many smaller nonprofits and social impact organizations as we can. So please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. Reading skills unlock the world for us and unleash not just our curiosity, but grant us and gift us the power to often choose our paths. My two guests today know this all too well, as their passion for helping kids learn to read began as a young married couple where they joined a USC alumni program reading with students every week at the USC School of Five inner city elementary schools. They quickly became aware of the alarming number of students who were reading below grade level. It was then that the seeds of the positive impact on literacy were planted. Initially focusing on child development, and we'll hear more about that with our guests, J3 Foundation was born. Eventually, after the birth of their daughter Jess, it iterated into a robust reading program in 2018 called J3s Cozy Reading Club under the umbrella of J3 Foundation. This focuses on the most vulnerable fourth graders in Los Angeles. This program has been so successful that it has expanded from a single pilot program to 16 schools and serves students during the school day and as part of their after-school reading program. J3 Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to give kids the foundation they need for a lifetime of reading success. They strive to equip fourth graders in communities with fewer resources with the tools they need to help them reach grade level literacy and foster a multitude of things: positive self-image, self-confidence, a supportive community, a new love of reading, and so importantly, acquiring an identity of a reader. For children in communities that lack resources, their free reading programs build good study habits, reading skills, and self-confidence. And I'd like to personally add another one, which is opening up whole new worlds for each child that they may not otherwise be exposed to. Their free reading program brings together individualized evidence-based lessons with measurable outcomes, a low staff-to-student ratio, culturally relevant books, and a community involvement to support reading progress in school and beyond. And it sounds really fun. I am so excited to introduce my two guests today. Both are so impressive in their own right and truly make a winning combination as co-founders of J3 Foundation and as a married couple. And I understand their daughter Jess is J3 Foundation Kid President, a truly impressive family, one that lives together and works together. Joe Blackstone is the co-founder of J3 Foundation and president and CEO of Blackstone Consulting Incorporated, a multi-million-dollar mid-sized service company established in 1991 based in Los Angeles. BCI provides security, food, janitorial, and facilities maintenance services to clients such as Apple, JP Morgan, Chase, AT&T, Kaiser Permanente, Northrop Grumman, and the Department of Defense. Prior to starting his own company, Joe worked as a management consultant for West Hudson in Los Angeles and Bain & Company in Paris, as well as a marketing representative for IBM in San Francisco. Joe earned his MBA at Southern Methodist University and his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Southern California. Yay, there's a lot of USC here, I see. Jamie Mon, I hope I pronounced that correctly. You'll correct me if I didn't, is the co-founder of J3 Foundation and is a clinical psychologist working in private practice in Los Angeles. She specializes in individualized treatment for children, adolescents, and adults who are going through transitions in their lives, such as divorce, new parenthood, illness, and grief. Jamie earned her PsyD from the California School of Professional Psychology, where her research focused on the impact of domestic violence on children. She developed an intervention program for pre-adolescents who had grown up in homes with domestic violence. The goal of the program is to stop the transmission of domestic violence across family generations. Fabulous. Jamie advises J3 Foundation on issues of social, emotional, and family learning. Quite wonderful in every way. So let's get started. Welcome, Joe and Jamie. It's clear that reading is a passion because it fundamentally reduces the risk of marginalized kids ending up in poverty. I'd love to know kind of your, I talked a little bit about your roots, but I want to hear it from each of you. And you're each in your own professional trajectories, which are successful, and yet you found the time to give back. And I'd love to hear that thought process of what occurred and how then it iterated into what it is today. So either one of you can start. I don't select. You get to.
I'll start, and Jamie, you go second there. How's that?
Perfect.
My journey into wanting to help and things of that nature is I'm an only kid of 2 HBCU graduates. And so I think for that piece, what you ended up with is you came out of the womb and they were like, he's going to college. He's going to have books and he's going to have a good education. And that's what was valued in my household. And I think when you are fortunate enough to do that and you have enough ability to look back at your own life, you realize how fortunate you were. And, my father had worked for R. O'Donnelley, the printing company. Mm-hmm. Some of the kids that we serve in J3 have absolutely zero books inside of their house. I used to live in a household where we got a new set of encyclopedias every year. He was in that business. And so books were everywhere. They were a part of our world. And then I think once you actually became an adult and you saw, and we were fortunate enough to work with the USC School of Five, you could really see how that can make a difference in a kid's life. And you really realized you got to get to them early. You need to get to as many as you can. You need to make it somehow not only fundamental from a reading perspective, but also from a fun perspective.
100%. And I think your job is even harder today, and I'll pass it to Jamie in a minute, because there's so many more distractions. There's so many things that pull us away from reading that are stories, streaming, things that are on our phones, on our laptops, on our, on our TVs, on everything. And so we have I think compared to when I was a kid, where reading was like an escape in a lot of ways, whether someone read to you or you did it yourself. And now there are a zillion other escapes. So the key word in that is fun. And then it unlocks so many other things for kids, which you pointed out. So Jamie, share a bit of your story, and then we'll kind of go into the connection that the two of you had.
So I have kind of a similar story to you, Laura, is that my mom read a lot to me and gave me a lot of her old books. She would take me to the library every week, and I would get this huge stack of books and come home through them. And it was my favorite thing to do. And she was she still is. She's 89 years old and is a big reader still. I always think about this when Joe mentions his father and encyclopedias. My brother and I used to lay on the floor in the dining room and go through the encyclopedia and read things to each other. He's 2.5 years older than me. And we would lay there and we could spend hours just saying, oh, wait, did you know this? Or did you read this? And for us to think about kids not having books in their homes, not having access to learning about things, reading about different places that they may never visit, having experiences that they will never be able to have. It just is a sad moment that they don't have that access. So we really do put a big emphasis on that in our program.
I love that. I also love the cultural competency piece. I did a podcast a couple of years ago with a guy who is actually, he does graphic design and art, and he's amazing. And he created this program called Heroes of Color because he's from the Dominican Republic, and he didn't want his children, he has 3 kids, to go to school and not to have any books or things that reflected what they look like. And so the fact that you've already thought of that, which probably comes naturally to you both, I think it's remarkable because it's wonderful to read about things that you may never go visit, but it's also wonderful to read and see pictures of people who look like you. I want to just say so many organizations try to do so much to eradicate whatever. You've targeted a specific area, and I love that. I think it's brilliant. So talk with me about, I'm sure your background in child development had a role in that significantly, but where did the two of you start thinking, okay, J3 will be sort of the developmental piece, and then you transition?
One thing I'd like to say about that is that we originally had thought that we were going to have kind of 2 arms of J3 Foundation, and it was going to be working with children who had been exposed to domestic violence and literacy. And the way those 2 things go hand in hand is you need to reach kids at a pivotal point in their lives to be able to make an impact. And in terms of intergenerational domestic violence, you have to reach them before they start dating. You have to reach them before they have had those experiences themselves. And it's much harder. Through our research with literacy, we started finding similar things, is reaching them earlier. In 4th grade, they don't teach people how to read anymore. They expect them to be able to read the social studies information and the history information, even in math and science. And if you can't read by then, basic sentences, it's almost impossible to be able to comprehend technical reading, period pieces from history, and things like that. And so we noticed that the correlation, and Joe can speak about that in a moment, with the numbers really began to become clear that if we did not reach them before this juncture, it much, much harder, because then they have started losing out in history and social studies and not being able to be competent in those classes as well.
I think the other thing is your self-confidence is gone. You start in 4th grade and you're reading at 1st or 2nd grade level. And so every single thing that we're asking you to read is a struggle. Now you're sitting here saying to yourself, why am I coming to school? Every time that I come here, I essentially am suffering because it's a confirmation that I am behind. You know, they say that 4th grade kids who are reading below grade level, that they have a 2 out of 3 chance of being either in poverty or in prison. And the private prison systems track the illiteracy reading rate of 3rd graders. If that number goes up, they build more prisons because they know that in 10 years they'll have that kid. Just disgusting as a societal thought process. So for us, there was a real focus. We were fortunate enough that our original program director, who's no longer there, was someone who had gotten her PhD at UCLA in early education and knew the types of things that we're describing now. She guided us and helped us to literally establish and say, look, what we've got to do is we have to have 4th grade kids. We have to get books that are intriguing, that are chapter books, that are illustrated books, that have exactly what you described earlier, that are books that look like the Black and brown primarily kids that we serve. Now those kids are going to be more intrigued about reading. And then you have to have nourishment. You have to have a meditation. You have to have a book of the day read. You need to make it. We had tents that we have in our rooms, in our classrooms, with book lights, and we turn the lights off, and it's a club. And literally, they've gone from the opposite of, I'm a 4th grade kid that can't read at the grade level, and I have no confidence to. I'm a member of a club that you're not a member of, and we get these cool books that we get to read on a regular basis.
And you have that in school during the day with some schools, and then you also have it as an after school, part of the after school reading program. Did I understand
When we
that?
started in 2018, all the way up until this year, it was always an after school program. We were able to convince, in particular, the schools in Compton Unified, all say from the superintendent, yes, I want this in the classroom. We came to them and said, look, we're competing with after school events, transportation, the kid that's tired at the end of a full day worth of school. So now what we've got is we get 6 kids pulled out of their classroom for 45 minutes twice a week with one of our reading coaches. So they get that group on, say, Monday, and then the same group of kids on Wednesday. It's been fabulous. We've been able to move the number of kids that we serve from just short of 400 last school year to over 600 this school year.
It's so exciting. And not only that, there's a level of consistency. Not only are you a member of the club that you pointed out earlier, but then you're consistently going. And it's, I would imagine it's usually a group of kids who are pulled out and get to do this special thing, which is not a punishment. It's a reward. It's sort of an exciting thing to be able to do. And I just want to comment on what you both alluded to, which is that 4th grade level. Once you are unable to keep up, you can't catch up. It's almost impossible to catch up, is what I'm hearing you both say. And research documents that, both with the sort of prison outcome or the poverty outcome, but just the ability. And then it also, when it impacts your self-esteem, you think, why should I bother? Because you're shamed every time you face not being able to. I did another podcast called Creating Creators in the film world. And they go into schools and they help them soup to nuts, create a script and do the whole thing. And they had you get up to be an actor in it. It's a whole thing that they do. It's a beautiful program. And they had told a story, and I just want to repeat it because it's exactly what you're talking about. This one kid had mastered, and I'm sure you've met children like this, who've mastered memorization, faking it, right? The whole thing, until it gets to a place where they can't fake it anymore. Kids with learning disabilities have suffered this way too. So this child got up, decided to audition, got the part, and then part of the process is you change, you edit as you're filming, because that's what real life is in the film world. So they edited, and he took it and he couldn't read it. And he had to sort of say, without shame. And they said, there's no shame in this. And they took him aside, tutored him, and he became one of the best students in the class. I love those stories, and it's exactly what you're talking about. You are giving these children an opportunity, and I hate to be in the world in the way that fulfills the potential that they have. But without that, they can't even begin to think about potential because they're too busy hiding their shame and too busy feeling less than. So I see Jamie nodding. So I don't know if you want to jump in.
You are exactly right on that. And the teachers will tell us stories over and over of these are the children who, in the classroom, when it came time for reading or to read out loud or do something, they're literally under their desks hiding because they did not want anyone to see that they were struggling. And these same kids that are in our program, that when they are back in their regular classroom, their teacher often knows what they're capable of now. And they call on those kids and they have them lead things and they have them read things. And they feel completely different about themselves. And we hear that from the kids. They are like, now that I can read, I can do anything. Even if we can't reach every single one of them, or we can't get every single one of them to that point, when we hear that, we realize we're like, there is a major difference.
That is a different kid and a different outcome potentially for that child.
And what I think happens, and this happened for both of you, and it certainly happened for me, is I took this for granted. I just assumed you go to school, you learn to read, right? And developmentally, it happens very differently for each child. My oldest child, I'll never forget this. I would be sitting with her endlessly, probably exasperated, even in 2nd grade, where she just it just didn't click. And then all of a sudden, it clicked. And she is a voracious reader, and I am so grateful. But until you kind of And not every teacher can do that with every student. There's just too many students. So the fact that you offer this supportive environment where it becomes a place where that can occur is a gift to the school, a gift to the teacher, a gift to the student, hopefully, a gift to the families who recognize that. So share with me a little bit about how, if they love a book, can they take it home? How do you talk to me about how you choose your books? Anything you want, but there's just so many questions I have.
I will, I'll start. You can finish. How's that, Jamie?
That sounds good.
We started with 200 books in that first school with 15 kids. And now we have 5,000 books. We have a person who was the elementary school librarian at one of the private schools here is on our staff now, and she curates our collection. What's new, what's different, what transforms in terms of all sorts of different things, whether it's race, religion, LGBTQ, you name it. She's always looking for books that are going to be intriguing and going to be inclusive. So the collection is that way. They keep track of the collection on Libid, which is just kind of an online database that basically our kids can look at. In fact, as I digress for a second, when we were during the middle of COVID, we couldn't go into the classrooms. So we would do everything via Zoom. So we had Zoom Cozy Reading Club. Every 3 weeks, we would go to the district office on like a Saturday, and the kids would pick out books online that they wanted. And then these were the 3 books that they had, and they would bring those 3 books back. And it was all non-contact, and it was special. And so that was then. And now what we end up doing is we get those 5,000 books back at the end of the school year. We curate them, we add, we figure out what got damaged, we do all of the things that we're going to do. And then we have like 2 big trucks in September, and our whole team of teachers and administrators and educators basically become U-Haul drivers, and they get all of those books to the schools. And then what we ask the schools to do is to give us a place where we can keep them. And in an after school space, we put them on a table. The kids are looking at them. They're like, I want that book. When we get cozy reading time, don't you even think about grabbing that book. And then they can use those books. They can take those books home, bring them back. And then the other beauty of the program is every trimester, so 3 times a year, we essentially give the kids anywhere from 1 to 3 books that are theirs.
I love that. Oh, that's beautiful.
End of the story is I started by talking about there are books where kids don't have any in their house. Well, if they're in J3, they're going to have 6 to 9 books in their house, at least at a minimum at the end of our program.
I love
Their
it.
books that they own. We work with groups that are really amazing, like the Book Foundation. And we literally, our librarian will literally say, these are the books that we'd like. If you have them, it would be great. And they go out of their way to make sure that those books are part of our ones that we gift to the kids at the end of each trimester.
I just wanted to add one piece in there that I find important is what we do when the Book Foundation gives us the books to give to the kids. There are usually 1 or 2 chapter books, and then there is a picture book. And our intention for that is for them to take that picture book home and read it to their siblings or read it to their neighbors.
My mind. That's great.
You mentioned in your intro about having someone read to you, and the literature shows that is very important to have someone read to you. So in our program, when these kids start out, they are often being read to by the teachers. It moves forward and then they're reading out loud. But we're also moving that home. So when they take those books home, we're encouraging them, read these out loud to your younger siblings. Do what we've helped you learn to do and do that with them.
I love that because you're introducing mentorship in a way. You realize that, right? I think it's so cool. When kids come to your program, is it usually a teacher who recommends them and that's how they come into your program? Tell me about that.
Mira Brown, who's in the USC program, and
Yep.
follows all of our data, and she's kind of our data guru person for the program. What we do as part of our MOU, our Memorandum of Understanding with the school, is we ask for just a few things from them. One of them is their test scores on the front end, their test scores on the back end. We identify the students that we think will be a grade, 2 grades, 3 grades below reading, and we identify those to the school, and the school effectively confirms, yes, that would be a good candidate for your program.
Tell me about the 5th and 6th graders. who've been in your program, do they come back and say, we want to come visit, we want to come read with you, what happens? Because you've really kind of capitalized on such a good feel as well as opening doors. And so I can't imagine at the end of that fourth grade year, when they are entering fifth grade, they don't kind of miss a little bit of the Cozy Reading Club.
I think that they do. We're not as close, Jamie and I aren't as close to the kids that are graduating. And I think because they know it's a 1-year program, then there's an expectation that, oh, I'm going to do this and then I'm not going to be in it. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and as we develop the program even more, is really follow where does that kid go, taking a look at where does the fourth grader who didn't go through J3 and where does the fourth grader who did experience J3, where does he or she end up in terms of their, either whether it's their reading, their prowess, what their professional. We started in 2018, so we now have 9th and 10th graders, 15 ninth graders that are out there in high school somewhere, and they're probably a different kid than they would have been had they not had those weeks with J3.
There's no question. And as you've developed the program further, there are not only more kids, but there's more depth to those experiences that will lend itself as you continue to look longitudinally, which is what you're suggesting, which I think is really, really brilliant. Share with me a little bit about when a kid is pulled out of a classroom, because my kids were in elementary, and of course that was a long, long time ago. Sometimes when you were pulled out, it could be perceived as sort of negative. And because of the way the school was structured and the way it occurred, how do you reframe this as sort of a positive, exciting, fun experience? The actual experiences, I have no doubt, but how do you introduce that, and how do the teachers buy into that so it feels like something fun and other kids could be a little jealous of?
That is our goal, is to make this something that is special, okay? Not something that is punitive. Because you couldn't do this, you have to do this. Not everyone's here and then, like calling out 6 names and you 6 kids. So you really need to make sure that you do that. And I think the other part of it is we try to make it so special in terms of they get something that no one else gets. They want to basically bring that back and tell their friends, as opposed to being ashamed of telling their friends.
It's such a nuance, and but it's so important. And the fact that you've recognized that, the two of you, and have introduced that and have that as a criteria for how your program runs is exceptional. Because of course, my kids were in elementary a zillion years ago, but it certainly isn't how it was done then. So I love that you have really introduced sort of the basic pieces of humanity that we sometimes forget. Kids feel like everybody else feels, maybe even more so sometimes.
I started Blackstone Consulting as one person in 1991. The idea was to scale that up. And we started with food service, and eventually we got to food and janitorial and security, and now we do that for major corporations, as you mentioned in your intro. And we have almost 10,000 employees now. And so I think scaling and growing and doing it with some type of a system, because that's maybe the engineering in me, is something that I think both Jamie and I are really organized people. And we just can't even think about like going from point A to point B without having this significant plan. And then what happens if you get halfway through and the plan changes? What do we do to adjust to that? I think we've taken that same personal and business approach to our foundation. We kind of give that structure, Jamie and I do, to the whole team. And then they've got big hearts and they've got incredible knowledge on the education side, and they bring that to the kids and to the families.
I love that. So there is hope that this will grow, be a model for other cities and other school systems, which would be amazing. So that's a thumbs up, Joe. I see that. So
when we started in 2018, our goal is to get to 1,000 kids in 10 years, okay, that we served on an annual basis. And we're well on our way to doing that. And I think what we've really realized is we could do this not only here, but we could do this, for example, in Oakland. We could do this in Chicago. We could do this in New York. And we could get 1,000 kids in each one of those cities. And we could replicate some of the things that we do in LA. And we could get the same collection that we have in LA and just replicate the collection in another city, right? We think we could get fundraising from major corporations that are based in those cities. Kaiser Permanente is based in Oakland, right? JP Morgan Chase is based in New York. You could go to those groups and say, look, here's our proven program in Los Angeles, Oakland, wherever, and we'd love to bring this program to the school districts in your town.
And what it's going to produce are future
For your
employees.
city.
Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? It's a no-brainer. So I love, like, there's, and Jamie, you probably know this too, just with CUs or things. There's tons of online training, some good, not so good, in every field. So wouldn't it be wonderful to access and utilize the ability to create your program where someone could purchase it, meaning a district or, a community through funding or matching or whatever it is, because we know public schools are really stretched for money, right, where they could have the training. You might have to fly up and walk through a few things, Joe, because that's your part of the wheelhouse, right? But be able to then have it recorded in a way where folks could utilize the benefit and, and gain the knowledge and the skills, and then the implementation where you might have to be more kind of hands-on. But the initial, I think it's a great idea. I really hope that happens. I would love that, because I think, boy, would you change the face of our future generations if we could do that. It's really one of the key things. And you started it with just a few kids, which is amazing. 15 kids. It's amazing. Jamie, I want to toss it to you for a minute. And this may be a question that's sort of outside of, maybe unrealistic, but I think because of your background as a psychologist, and particularly your expertise in domestic violence and pulling these things kind of together initially and trying to think it through, which is amazing. Do you sometimes find that staff will come to you with a particular issue about a kid and say, I need to talk with you, talk through this because I'm not sure what's going on, or I'm just struggling because this kid is having some behavioral stuff, but I think it's due to other reasons, or I don't know, because you've got such a wealth of knowledge yourself. I don't know if that ever pops into the program.
It actually doesn't, because we have someone on staff that Courtney is on staff, and so a site coordinator, a reading coach will take that to her, and she is the head of restorative practices within J3, so she will be able to help them troubleshoot. And so they will take it to her and say, we don't know what's going on. And there was an example of a kid, and I can't give you all the specifics, and we just wrote about it recently for the giving list. But the point was, this child was so disruptive in class. The teachers just did not know what to do. They started to say, we don't know that we are going to be able to keep this child in here. And between Courtney and the teacher, they brainstormed, they talked it out, they tried to figure out what was going on with this child. They started using a lot of the psychological practices of giving him some special assignments and things like that. And the child completely changed, and they started to understand a lot of the underlying things that were going on with him, that were going on with his family. And by the end, this kid was helping the other kids. He's like, oh, I understand how to do this word attack. Let me help. I can jump in. I can show these kids how to do this. And it changed everything. Wow. And this was a child we didn't want to lose. We didn't want to let go of, but we also knew we had a responsibility to all of the other kids. So we do have that on staff. That's great, because that is also having that understanding that a lot of our students come from places of trauma, violence in the community, or instability in their home lives, food instability or housing instability, families that are potentially transient families. And so we know that we can't just start saying, okay, let's learn this and let's learn this. We need some sort of mindfulness to get them settled and in their bodies and able to take in that information. And we knew that early on. And so that's why we put those practices into our program, where we can help ground the kids before we start to try to give them reading instruction. Or if a kid just needs to go with a teacher and talk about what's going on in their life, we can let them do that as well and have an understanding, where in a regular classroom, that's just not very possible.
You've really thought of all these things because this is what a kid's life is really about. It's not isolated. So you've really thought of that. I love that you brought up mindfulness. I actually open every class with my graduate students with 5 minutes of mindfulness, deep breathing. They don't have to participate, but it's exactly what you talked about. We all have to be grounded. We all have to be in the same space at the same time to do work together. And so if you don't do that, there's competing things going on. So I have to ask, I noticed on your website that your daughter is the kid president. So how did she kind of get involved in the beginning? And I love that she's the kid president. She should be.
It's a source of pride for her, I will say. And it was interesting. This last year, we revamped our website completely. We really hadn't been talking to her too much about it, but that was just, I took about 9 months to really work on this and revamp it. And one day she came home and she said, "Mom, the website looks completely different." And I said, "What were you doing?" She said, "I was showing all my friends." The places she has loved to get involved were before COVID, we would have an event at our house quite frequently where we would invite a lot of our friends who were volunteers to tape up books, because these books get a lot of use, to going to all these different schools, going home with kids and coming back. And so we would have a big event at our house where people would come and sit and just tape and tape and tape. She would love to get involved in those and have her friends come and everyone would tape. And then pre-COVID, we did 2 really big fundraisers with, I don't know, I guess what, 400 people?
500, right? Outdoor.
Big festival at Calamigos in Malibu. And we had all these games for kids, and it was a big family. It was called the Family Fun Festival. And so she got involved in that. Lately, being a teenager with her own extracurriculars, there's not as much room, but I do envision, because we also then let high school students volunteer and get community service credit. So I think that'll be something that she will then have groups of her friends do with her to get community service credit for school or for outside organizations.
Oh, I think that's terrific. I think, again, she's grown up with your organization. She's growing with it. And so iterating as well, which I think is wonderful. Would you say, this is maybe an unfair question too, do you think the majority of your books do get returned from kids? Because I know myself, sometimes I'll forget.
I think we get like 99% of our books back.
Amazing.
Maybe add another percent or 2 that you have that are damaged and things of that nature. But yeah, if we send out 5,000 books, we're getting 4,900 of those books back.
So I want to speak to that for a second, because I'm going to just kind of go out on a little bit of a limb, but I think it's because of the culture that you all have created. It's a culture of community. And so therefore kids want to be included. They want to give back. They want to mentor other people in their family, either younger kids or maybe a parent where English isn't their first language. So you have created a culture that is, I can't imagine that a school wouldn't want to embrace, because I think schools often struggle with culture because there's so much competing stuff. And so you have single-handedly created a culture that is of reciprocity and community and supporting one another, mentoring, self-confidence that you mentioned before. So I just need to highlight that, because that's what I hear. And I just think it's beautiful. And, I hope it spreads.
We really want it to spread. Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just saying, that's a lovely thing you just said. And that is music to my ears, that as you spoke those words, I thought, I hope that is true, that yes, these are the results we are getting in terms of kids reading. Yes, and we're getting the books back. And I hadn't really thought of it in that way. And if that is true, that is lovely and something that we can be very, very proud of.
For sure. It's what I feel. I mean, I'm, sort of intuiting it, but it really is what I feel. And I think that more organizations, for-profit and nonprofit, should be embracing that concept of culture. Oh, I have one. Before we do our quick and gutsies, which I always do, quick and gutsy questions at the end of the podcast, I'd love for each of you to share an aha moment, however you want to interpret that, related to J3. What has been an aha moment for you?
For me, it's about growth and getting to more kids. And we had a really amazing first program director, okay, who connected with kids, really thought through. She was very intentional about, we do meditation at the beginning of every after school session, okay? We started with a book of the day read where she started reading it at first. And then the site coordinator started reading it, and then the students started reading it, right? But what I also recognized was, and this is no disrespect to her, is that she loved a small group community that she could impact. You know, those 15 kids at that one school was precious to her. And when we moved to the second school, Watts Learning Center, you know, I could see that this was like becoming less control, more of a production and a repetitive thing. And that's what we really wanted. And so I think that was my aha moment that, you know, this is great. We love what you're doing. And I think she felt it also. And that wasn't what she wanted to do and where she goes. And she's doing some amazing things at one of the major universities in North Carolina now. But it really was an aha moment of, we got to get to peak. You got to get to numbers of kids, replicate and have a program that we can say, this year we started with one school, next year we have two, next year we have four, you know, and we move from like 4 to 16 or 4 to 12 in like no time. We would love to move from the 16, 18 schools that we have now to 30 and 40. There's got to be a moment where one person at a high level says, I don't care what else we do, we've got to do this J3 program to get this installed in our schools.
It's a no-brainer, right? I think that I love that because you really are about scaling. You really are about impact, and that comes through. And I think what's going to benefit J3 is continuing on that trajectory to then be able to say, here's a proven track record. This is a no-brainer because of this. This is going to, and sadly, to say, I don't want to get political, but my kids were in school with No Child Left Behind. And to me, that was a disaster. Sorry, it was, because it reduced the curriculum and taught to the test. You're doing the opposite. You're building capability so that kids can think on their own and do well because of the skills they're getting. So it's going to improve schools by virtue of what you're doing because you're improving student skills. So Jamie, any aha moment for you other than that beautiful story you shared?
This one came from way back when our first director was putting the program together. And it sounds so simple, but I didn't really ever think of it in this way. And that is that we needed to cultivate a library for these kids that could be reading at a second grade level about the same topic that the fourth graders were reading about. So at the time, the idea was like Michael Jordan. So if the fourth graders are reading about Michael Jordan, the kid who is reading at the second grade level cannot be reading a book that is directed to a second grader because the material is just not interesting enough, and the child will be embarrassed to show anybody else what they are reading. But if they're reading a book about Michael Jordan that is written for a second grade level reader, they can then have a conversation with all of their friends who might be reading a higher level Michael Jordan book, but they are learning similar content from the book, and they're able to add into the conversation, and they're able to have that connection, and they're not hiding their book. It looks like a book one of their friends would be reading as well. And the more I understood that, the more I realized how just handing a child, a fourth grader, a second grade book is embarrassing and shameful, and you're not going to get them to pull out that book anywhere where somebody can see them. And so, and then that's one other place where graphic novels come in. Graphic novels are just as valuable and educational as a chapter book. And so to be able to bring those into our collection and to be able to search far and wide for books about the same topic that the fourth graders who are not in our program are reading, but written at a level that a second grader could, or second grade reading level could read, makes all the difference. That was my aha moment, along with representation and all of these things. But just to have the current thing that everybody's talking about and wants to read about at their level.
That is brilliant, because of course a kid wants to fit in. We all want to belong. We all want to fit in at any age. And so when you take a vulnerable kid, and they're vulnerable because they have not the skill set that they need, not of a fault of their own, and put them in a position to always be in a one down position, you will never get that kid. So what that example demonstrates so remarkably and so beautifully is that you just shift the level where the content can be enough that that kid can belong. And it's a lesson for us as adults when, both of you are in fields where you have jargon, right? And half the people that we might be presenting to, if we're presenting or we're engaging with, we might use something. Many of them won't say, can you explain what that is? Because they don't want to be outed, right? We're guilty of that as adults. So Jamie, thank you. I try not to do that, but thank you for the reminder of how to be truly inclusive. One piece of it. I love it. It's great. So if you all are ready for our quick and gutsy, our round of quick and gutsy questions that I always do at the end of the podcast, you can't, I'll be like one of the, you belong. There's no wrong answer. If you can't think of something, it's no big deal. These are just fun, and they're really about J3. So you answer them on behalf of what you've already said in some ways, but we just get to put a little emphasis on it. So are you both ready?
Ready.
What is at the top of your wish list for J3? However, the answer can't be money or funding. What's at the top of your wish list? And you each get an answer, by the way.
I know, Joe. So you do yours first, and I'll think while you're doing yours.
You think you know mine, or you think I know one?
I think I know yours.
Okay. Mine would be, we're getting rid of money, so it's expansion of the program.
Right.
Scaling. I would have said that too. Yep, we're going to do it. And Joe, by the end of whatever, or, this is going to be in every major city. It's going to be, you're going to have an online where people can come and learn bits and pieces if they need refresher courses. I'm telling you, this is how it's going to happen. But yeah, I see it. I see it.
Our book collection should be something that we just share. I mean,
right. And we have to knock on those educator doors. And I love your idea of corporate support. And corporate social responsibility might want to weigh in on that, because there is nothing more important than education. If we have an educated society that can think for themselves and feel good about themselves, I think honestly, and this is Jamie, your thing, we'll have less violence in general. That's what I think. I shouldn't really say that, but I really believe it, because then you feel like you're included and you belong. So Jamie, what's yours?
I would think this might initially sound like it's about donation or money, but I would love to have someone that I really admire, like a Michelle Obama or someone like that, love our program. And not just to try to get the word out or whatever, but just to have someone that I respect read it, hear about it, and say, hey, you guys, this is a great program. And I think that is just something that I do think will happen as we move forward. I think that will happen.
I love Michelle Obama, and she would be all over this, So we just have to let her know. And that's actually one of my questions later on. So you can repeat that answer if you want. That's a choice. But I love that. I love that. If you were to think of a song that describes J3, what would it be? Or it could be a lyric. If you don't have a song off the top of your head, it could be a lyric.
Okay, I'd say the song that I'm thinking of, I don't know why this came to me, is Taking the Long Way Around. I think when we look at where we started and what we're doing, and then also that we were intentionally not just going as big as we can, that we're making sure we can scale it. I think in a lot of ways, I think that we have people in our lives that might say, go for more. And we're constantly saying, we want to make sure that foundation under there is really strong. But I think sometimes it does feel like maybe we're taking the long way around.
I think it's smart growth, because if you go too quickly, you may lose some of the fundamentals that make your program so strong. So I totally hear what you're saying, but that's great. I love that. Good choice. Joe, what about you?
Happy by Pharrell Williams.
I love that. I love that song too. That's great. Well, it describes your kids when they go through your program. That's what I would say about that. So what makes J3 gutsy? Your organization is gutsy. You're on Small and Gutsy. What makes you gutsy?
I think we were really gutsy by taking the feedback from Mira Brown, the research that she was coming, and saying, we are going to revise our program right now. And do these things. And I think we could have easily waited on that, stalled on that. But I think we were really gutsy in just saying we're going to do it. That's not Joe and I necessarily. That's our program team that pushed forward on that. And so I would say they were gutsy in pushing that and making it happen.
So I have to say something about that because Mira's a former student of mine, which I love. And that's how we got connected. And I admire that. And I think, again, I go back to the culture that you've created within the program itself. And I think it's also quite symbolic and quite telling that same culture is within how you operate the program in terms of staff. So I'm very impressed because you didn't resist, you heard it, you took it in, you created change. And that's not always easy to do. So I really admire you. And I think it is gutsy to do that because you're really open to hearing feedback.
I have a thing with feedback that people will come to me and they'll ask me something and I'll ask them. And what I tell them back is I said, what would you do if you couldn't come to me? Like if you didn't come to me and ask that question, what would you do? That is the right answer right there.
I love that. I'm going to use that,
Indeed.
Joe. Thank you. I love it.
I think our gutsy moment was when we invited 75 people to our house in 2018 with no program, with just a program director, and we told them what we were going to do. We got one school in mind, X number of kids, and this is what we believe. And we sat in front of people, and none of them left. We gave them alcohol, so that probably helped.
I love it.
But no one left, and we had enough guts to say that's what we want to do.
I love it.
We said we are not asking for any money. We are just saying this is what we're doing, and we want you to. And we put cards out, and we said, can you write names and email addresses of people you think might be interested in being on our mailing list to learn more? We're not going to be asking them for money until we get to a big fund, until we do the big Family Fun Festival fundraiser in a year or so. But we said, we're trying to build, not only it could be somebody that you think might want to donate, or it might be somebody you think might want to work with us, or it might be somebody that knows somebody in the school systems, or that somebody knows a principal. So then we would just started getting all these emails and all these things. So I think you're right, Joe. That was gutsy because we also said we're not asking for any money whatsoever.
It's gutsy, and it's probably one of the best ways to network that you can think of, which served you well. And it served you well to say, just listen to what we're going to do. We're doing it anyway. We hope you'll be along for the ride and whatever this is. And here's what we need today, not in the future. It's great. It's brilliant. What is something that outsiders or maybe even a few insiders don't know about J3 Foundation? Anything that you can think of?
We try to tell the world everything about us. I'm thinking.
I think the thing that some people don't know are we have some real rock stars on our staff, current staff and previous staff that have moved on to other part jobs in their lives. And I think we have been fortunate to have some people that are truly rock stars.
So Jamie already has the answer to this next question. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about your program, who might it be? So now you got a second one you can do since you already, or we could just go with Michelle Obama because she's so amazing.
I think she would appreciate our program. You know who else popped into my head, and just probably because I follow her on Instagram, is Amanda Gorman, the poet.
I love her. Oh my gosh.
She would be somebody that would probably...
She would love this. She actually is open about her early speech disability too. That was amazing. And my son graduated in the same class with her and her sister at New Roads. Yeah, she was the poet laureate, I think, for LA. And she gave the commencement speech, and she was not, well known other than that. And I remember turning to my mother saying, oh my goodness, this young woman is amazing. And that was just the graduation. I was like blown away then. That's my little personal connection, which isn't really a personal connection, but I think she's fabulous. Boy, would she love this. I think you have to get to her. We got to figure that out. Joe, what about you?
We keep creating a list because we have the largest concentration of our schools are in Compton.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've done is we started looking and going, who is in Compton and who has connections to the city? And so I would probably go with a combination of either Dr. Dre or maybe Serena or Venus Williams. All have done amazingly different things, but are all have, at least on the surface, have big hearts and give back and things of that nature. And I just think that that would be really a special group of individual to be a part of what we do.
Anything else you want to add before we close out the podcast?
I think the only thing I didn't say that probably would have made a little more sense, but I don't think I need to go back and edit is, so I went to USC and I was a journalism major. And then my career before I became a psychologist was I had a marketing and design firm and a graphic design firm. And so that probably fills in that hole of why I do all of these pieces of this, because that was my career before I went and became a psychologist. I know you were saying, do you do the psychology part? And I was thinking, no, I've been doing so much of the
graphic and marketing, but that's okay too. I think because you've hired somebody, you already thought how important it was to have someone with those capabilities to work with kids who really struggle. Most of the time, we don't always know necessarily why a kid is acting out. And so we go to sort of sadly, the punitive side rather than the compassionate, understanding side. Where can folks reach you? How do they learn about you?
www.j3foundationla.org. Okay, so that's j3foundationla.org. That's how you reach us. You can reach us also by phone, 310-472-0405. But more importantly, I think it's to see and get a feel for the online portion of what we do, and there's stories and there's videos and there's pictures of the Family Fun Festival, and you really get a flavor for this isn't just a dry reading program that's like we're going to drill in these phonetics to you and these multi-syllable words and things of that nature. We're going to take and have a big old party. Okay, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, Jamie, the website's great, by the way. I think it's great. I love the videos. I love the colors. I love all of it. I think it's really, there's something soothing and engaging at the same time.
I appreciate that. We
almost lost our marriage over that, Well, between the website work and the Family Fun Festival, the first year we had a coordinator. The second year, our longtime assistant, Bobby, who we haven't mentioned, but kind of heads up all of our fundraising marketing stuff. Bobby and Jamie took the lead. And I tell you, there were times when I was like, maybe I shouldn't come home from the office because the two of them had been grinding through the stuff and there were like nails in the chalkboard.
It's stressful. I mean, it's...
And everything else or whatever. And I think they both looked at me afterwards. Luckily, COVID came in right after. But they both looked at me like, there's no way we're doing this again. If we do this again, there's going to have to be somebody else that's in the mix. So...
It's exhausting and stressful and all of the rest of it, but you came through it, and you came through it stronger, which is really fabulous. So I just want to take a moment and thank you both for spending time with me and becoming part of the Small and Gutsy family. And my wish for you is that this really does scale in the way that you want, and that our fourth graders become the next high-level, gifted entrepreneurs, employees, wonderful strategists to give us their best potential in our world to come, because we need it. We really need it. So thank you both.
We would love to be large and gutsy and help you with anyone small and gutsy. How's that?
Perfect. I love that. Thank you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you both for spending time with me.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All of the Small and Gutsy episodes can be found on the Intrinsic Group website, which has a Small and Gutsy page. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and do not reflect the position of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the Small and Gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their impactful work. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, my brilliant sound engineer and composer, Pavel Franson, my very talented graphic designer, Nate Addy. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website. My incredible board of directors, Tracy Brown, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Serena Rajabian, who believed in me and this project enough so to sign on to support this effort, and all of the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, number one fan, and best friend, without whom none of this would be possible. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. And thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff. Thanks for listening.